Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here on Gather to Grow. My name is Dawn Numdu. I'm your host for this evening. And today we're talking about growing peppers in Mzansi. I have one of my speakers here. Tandeka Masejo is the owner of Blooming Fresh Produce. I'm going to ask you just to tell us a little bit about yourself. So just unmute your mic and tell us a bit about your journey in agriculture and what you produce.
My name is Tanya Masego, 23-year-old agriculturist. I'm currently in a departmental learnership. I deal with crop and livestock. I've started last year, which is 2020, 1st of September. We currently have mustard, spinach, onion, and beetroot.
Let's talk about just timelines. For someone who's considering growing peppers, what should they be thinking about?
Well, most of the time, it's actually quite hard to grow seedlings on your own, especially if you are a beginner. So what we do, you place an order. There's nurseries. We use Pretoria and Nelspruit, so we order seedlings there. Some nurseries always have. They don't make the seedlings by an order. They always have those. So if maybe even if you can 2 days before, a week before, you can go there, get your seedlings and start planting. If you plant your green peppers in cold weather, it's still okay. As long as you're going to be able to maintain everything, it's still okay because they do prefer low temperatures because they are very sensitive to sunburn. So it's still okay. It's actually throughout the year. You can plant them any season.
We spoke also briefly about, the various varieties that are available when you start out, and choosing the right variety is also important. What should farmers consider in terms of, that? And then also in terms of starting material, if you're considering sowing your own seedlings, what should you be thinking about?
In considering doing your own seedlings, if you are a beginner, I wouldn't advise, but then it's still good for a try. They can get compost. They can try and get compost from TWKs. You can get them from Afri, hinterlands, and so forth. So you can get the compost soil, and then you have to get your trays. There's trays that we use when we're making seedlings. So they just have to use that compost soil, trays, and water. You must actually put the nets on top of the trays so that you can maintain, so that there's no much air disturbing your seedlings or there's no much sunlight because they have to be maintained.
We also spoke specifically about how to grow. How do you compare what the best is for the specific crop? You spoke earlier now, it shouldn't be exposed to too much sunlight. So what are some of the starting blocks for that specifically?
I think any way is okay as long as maintained as needed. If you are going to be able to maintain your green peppers when you have them on the field, it's still okay because there's chemicals to prevent that sunburn. So if you don't want the stress of sunburn, you can obviously take them to the tunnel, greenhouses and things like that. But if you buy the chemicals that will give your crops the energy, that will strengthen them not to be affected by the sunlight, then I think it's still okay. Anyway, it's okay as long as you maintain.
Another thing is regarding mulching and weeding if you're planting in an open field. I understand that this is also very important when farming with peppers. What has your experience been like specifically with this crop?
With the peppers, I did mulch my peppers. It's the best way because it reduces the need for hand weeding and it also lowers the chances of transmitting diseases such as bacterial and fusarium wilt. So it's the best way because it also maintains the moisture in the soil. It preserves the moisture and it smoothens the weeds. You won't have to worry too much about weeds if you do the mulching. And as of weeding, yes, that's one of the biggest problems to farmers, but fields should be kept weed-free by doing shallow weeding in early stages. Obviously, you should take out your weeds because that avoids diseases. It minimizes actually the transmit of diseases. The minute you see them, you get rid of them because they compete with your crops. You don't need that your crop competes with weeds in terms of nutrients and water, especially at a very early stage.
Is it very labor intensive if you're starting out on a big scale? How much time do you spend, for example, with your agricultural workers weeding in an open field?
Yeah, too much done. Weeding is hell. You actually have to hardworking people first before you consider the number. It actually has to be hardworking people. Because actually on my side, I prefer hand picking. Because if you are going to be using your horse, the equipment, you may disturb, you may injure your crops. So yeah, it's actually a bit of a much work. So I think 30 or less people can be able to do the job in maybe 2 weeks. It depends on whether you get people who are willing to do the job or not, but it's very difficult.
Yeah, I think that's one of the comments that Eric was also making. If you're a farmer starting out, that this crop is probably one of the more difficult crops to grow as a beginner farmer? And in terms of watering and irrigation method, does this crop require a lot of water? And what are some of the things that people should keep in mind when it comes to growing peppers?
When it comes to watering, Don, I think it's very important for farmers or beginners to have it in mind that you have to have a schedule when it comes to irrigating. You cannot be irrigating 7 a.m. in the morning, 11 a.m., and then tomorrow you change the time. Just have a schedule when you know that if I irrigate my crops on 7 a.m. and again on 6 p.m., then it's going to be that schedule. You don't change, you understand? So that your crops get to be used to that particular schedule that you use. Because if you change, then it becomes a bit of an issue. I wouldn't say it requires water so much, but it does get to be a problem if you get to change the schedule of the irrigation.
And your experience when it comes to that, and when you farmed with a specific crop, what was your method or best practice?
I irrigated with a drip irrigation because it's a flowering crop. So it's best to be irrigating with a drip irrigation. So I used drip irrigation, but the rain gave me problems because it was raining too much when I had my green pepper on the ground. It ended up causing diseases for me, such as blossom end rot. Well, blossom end rot is not a disease, but it's a psychological disorder. It was causing lack of calcium in the fruit, so it's a problem for me. We experienced much rain. It needs drip irrigation, so you can imagine if it's raining non-stop. Those flowers don't need water on them, so it became a very challenge.
Our other speaker, Tebogo, is here. She's from Farmers Hope. Tebogo, welcome to Gather to Grow. Just a bit about yourself, where you're based, and just more about, what you do in agriculture.
Farmers Hope is based in the village called Komo in Makapanstad area in the Northwest Province. Basically what we do peppers, we do jalapeno, and during winter we also do some spinach and tomato.
I know that you've been listening into the conversation, and maybe just your take on, I think, the point that Watandeka was making in terms of irrigation and how much water this crop actually needs. Just some insights on that.
It's always advisable to use the drip irrigation because at least if you use the drip irrigation, you can measure the water that you are putting on the plant. Because like Tandega said already, it does not need too much water, otherwise it might cause some serious problems. Like I experienced lots of rain last year, November and December and January, and of which was not good at all for the peppers. So at least the drip irrigation, it helps to measure the water that is needed.
Thanks so much, Tebogo. Eric Mae is from Oneo Farms in Taulton and Gauteng. Eric, Tandeka, and Tebogo has just been highlighting some of the questions that I raised around timelines, planting timelines, ideal climate, and also starting materials. Just a bit about yourself for people in the space who might not know you as a start.
My name is Eric Mawane. I'm the MD of Oneo Farms. We are based in Taulton in the West Rand, just outside of Krugersdorp. We are pepper and the chili farmers in this area.
Thanks so much, Eric, and thanks so much for being here again on Gather to Grow to talk about all things peppers. And you mentioned that you've been farming with a variety of peppers. What does the market look like for this crop? I maybe want to focus on that a bit. And then maybe we can also focus on some of the costs involved to start out. What should farmers be thinking about when it comes to this specific crop, Eric?
We mainly pushing seedlings or seeds from Agrotech and Rix1. But the highest cost of getting into pepper production is the seedling, the high quality seedling. But over and above that is the high cost of fertilizer. There are very specific fertilizers that you need to apply on a weekly basis, be it the granules or the foliar mix, but it's a must. You must have a proper fertilizer program. And one of the second part is you normally do your soil analysis, and based on your soil analysis, the agronomist would normally work out your fertilizer program. It normally differs from one farm to the next, as much as it does differ, but it's normally about 10-15% difference. So there are basic fertilizers, but that's where the highest cost of pepper production is, both the seedlings and the fertilizer.
Thanks so much for that, Eric. We covered quite a bit in terms of starting material. I think Tandeka was talking about, it's better to start with seedlings, and you've also highlighted that. But what are some of the threats? Let's talk about some of the pests and diseases. And I think everyone has been talking about the heavy rains and that being bad for this crop. What are some of the preventative measures when it comes to the threats as well?
At Oneo Farms, we're farming our peppers in greenhouses, but also we do have some of the chili, which is the same family, in the shade nets. So with extreme rain that we just had, but either way, even if we don't have extremely rain, chances are you are bound to experience mildew and a lot of the powdery mildew because of the humidity. So it is a must that you sort of prevent and work on a preventative method of treating powdery mildew.
Has this also been your experience, Tandeka and Tebogo, with farming this specific crop? And we've actually focused on powdery mildew, on crop specifically, also the preventative measures on Food for Mzansi and Farmers Inside Track as well. Tandeka, Tebogo, has this also been your experience?
Well, the main problem with me was trips. And there's this insect, I think it's Helicobacter caterpillar. It was feeding on the flowers, the fruits, the leaves. But the problem was that, first, let me start by mentioning the cutworm. After I transplanted my peppers, I had a challenge with cutworm. It was attacking the plants. At a very early stage, it was cutting them. I now had to run to buy the insecticides. So I think before I can talk about pest issues, I'll start by advising the farmers that they should get their insecticides ready, because you will not predict if whether your peppers or whatever that you have planted won't give you problems. So you get your insecticides ready. I had a challenge of trying to get everything together when everything was already falling apart. So I had a problem with cutworm. I was able to treat that. And then there's this one insect that I just mentioned, Helicobacter caterpillar. It was also a bit of a challenge, and thrips as well. But I tried to manage the situation, though I can say I failed because it ended up being a very, very big issue. So the main problem with me was cutworm, Helicobacter caterpillar, and thrips.
And Tebogo, what has your experience been like?
I also had a very bad experience the first time I planted my peppers in the plastic tunnels, because we are based in Northwest, and Northwest can be very hot, especially during December, January. So I was actually attacked by aphids, and when I realized that I had aphids, they already multiplied and it was very late. So I really struggled to fight them. I lost all my peppers. So we always scout on daily basis our plants, and we must also try to have the necessary chemicals before time.
Let's focus on what the market looks like. When it comes December time, you need to make sure that your crop is ready, the food, so we need to have that available for them. What does the landscape look like when it comes to marketing the specific crop?
You know, unlike your tomatoes that we could talk about ZZ2, we talk about carrots, we've got oruganis. There is not that one farmer that is currently dominating the pepper market. The one company that is sort of trying to dominate is Marlo. So the pepper market looks great in between November and December, and again between April up until August. So there's a huge demand of the peppers in winter, and that's because a lot of us are out of production around that time. Prices are looking awesome. They're not just looking good, but they look awesome in winter season. But again, the December period around Christmas.
And then in terms of advice for farmers starting out, what should they be thinking about in terms of if they want to diversify? What are some of your tips? Tandeka, I think you said that this was now the first time farming with this crop specifically. What advice do you for farmers?
It's a good crop to begin with. Advice that they go for it. But as I said, that I experienced challenges with it, I wouldn't want any farmer to experience. They should just get their things together. For now, I'd advise that they place an order for their seedlings. If you are a beginner and you want to do your seedlings on your own. So they should get their sticks together if they're going to be supporting with sticks. They should get their strings if they're going to be doing the trellising part. They should get their insecticides ready. They should get their fertilizers ready to avoid all of the stress of wanting to sort out things immediately when everything is starting to fall apart. Especially the irrigation part, they just got to make sure that they have water up and running, so that when they have their peppers on the ground, it also has enough water to feed on.
And then, Eric, do you also agree with, I think Tandeka mentioned earlier that she prefers to do things by hand. Is this what farmers should think about when starting out? And I think one of the points that you made in terms of, fertilizers and that being, one of the most expensive parts of farming with peppers, but also just an important aspect. And testing your soil as well. What is your take on that?
One of the key things, Don, that we normally miss, and this goes out in general in farming, we tend to take shortcuts when it comes to soil preparation. So at Onel Farms, we tend to spend a lot of our time on proper soil preparation. Once we've done that, we do our soil analysis. And I've seen a lot of farmers that want to take the shortcuts, mainly because of the cost of fuel, the cost of getting the right implements to do your proper soil preparation. But that is the one phase that we used to make the mistake of previously, that we do not do that anymore. Tandeka mentioned something about cutworms. If you don't open your eyes within 48 hours, if you don't treat your cutworms, they could easily clean out your production. So you need to spend a little bit of time observing such. One thing that we tend to forget, I know Tebogo mentioned aphids. So aphids normally go hand in hand with whiteflies. I've seen pepper farmers that went out of production because of those two pests, whiteflies and aphids. An aphid lays about 1,000 eggs a night. So if you don't have your eyes open up, within a week, if you don't treat them right at the beginning, you could easily be out of production within 5 to 7 days if you don't treat those kind of things. And those are my advices with the pharmacies. Do your proper soil preparation, do it so well, and make sure that when you start planting, you've got everything up to standard. Your irrigation is up to scratch. You've tested your irrigation system. You've got the right quality of the seedling.
Eric, if you do come back, I'll just have you pick up from where you left off. Maybe Tebogo, you can also just, I think what he was talking about is very important in terms of soil preparation. What type of material would you need? And also, besides testing the soil, what should you actually be doing? And also, what are the type of tools that you'd need? Because a lot of the time, people don't really have the mechanization, especially if you're a new farmer, tractors and all the other equipment. So where should you start or think about when it comes to that?
I think going back to the roots, I'm still a fan of a spade fork. Back to the roots of how things used to be done. It's sort of a guarantee that you've prepared your soil so well. And I've seen quite a number of people not have the right implements, but they've got the right tools. The right tools to tend the soil, and you do things manually. This is how it used to be done before we went big on mechanization. Turn your soil, use your spade fork, turn your soil, and make sure that it's firm. There are also other displays, or other ways to pick up if your soil is well prepared. When you form a fist with your soil and it doesn't become loose when it's a little bit wet, just know that your soil is ready for planting.
Thanks, Eric. Let's talk more about the market. Also, what does it actually look like? I think, Eric, you're the most diverse in terms of the variety that you have and actually sending your crops to market. What are some of the prices that you can actually get for this produce?
On a normal yellow and your red peppers, your normal average price is about 25-30 rands for a kilogram of the good quality. On a normal, your November, January, February. As we speak right now, our peppers are going at about 45 to 50 rands for a kg. So we're looking at about between 250 to 350 rands for a box. That's for a 4.5 kg box. And that's the reason I'm saying in winter, the prices tend to hit the roof because the demand is higher, but the supply is low. So in December, your average yellow and red pepper, you're looking at about 140 rands for a 4.5 kg. You're looking at about 70 rands for your green pepper boxes. But April up until the end of August, beginning of September, the prices do hit the roof right now. Quite a lot of people used to say they seem to be getting lower prices at the fresh produce market. But that's a trick with the fresh produce market. Remember, they buy with their eyes. And if you do spend a little bit of time at the fresh produce market, you'll also pick up that your Woolworths, your Pick n Pay, and everyone else is present at the market. What you need to do is make sure that your quality stand out from the rest. And I've picked up a lot of the emerging farmers. They tend to send some of the lower quality produce to the fresh produce market. And it should actually be the other way around. So what we do is I would rather send my second grade to Woolworths and send my first class pepper to the fresh produce market, because I'm guaranteed I'm going to get more money at the fresh produce market than what I would actually get.
Eric, are you still with us? I think he dropped there. I think network is really not working with us tonight, but thanks so much, Eric, for that. So I think we've covered a lot of ground in terms of where to plant, how to plant, some of the information around the soil. I think we've spoken about weeding and mulching, but I think the one thing we haven't spoken about is pruning the specific crop. What does it take? How should you be thinking about it? Does it need to happen for all pepper varieties? Thandeka or Eric, if you're able to respond to that one.
Pruning is key. But we've also made some mistakes previously where we brought in some of the not so experienced people to prune our peppers. Which flowers to pick up, when to pick up, and how they look. That actually determine if you're going to get more yield, more flowers. Pruning key. So what we also then did was to get people, their job is specifically on a daily basis to prune the peppers and our chilies. And because they master this art, that's basically what they do. With them pruning, they also then in turn gives us more production and more yield.
So that's definitely a vital part. Thandeka, was this also your experience with the specific crop? And also just apologies from Tebogo. She says that her network is failing her. So I'd just like to thank her for being here. And hopefully we get to speak to her again another session. Thandeka, just your experience with pruning the specific crop as well. Do you agree with Eric?
I totally agree with Eric on the pruning part. because when you prune your trees, you let your nutrients and your water focus on where they should focus. So now if the branches are more on a tree and the nutrients have to be shed, the water also has to be shed, that may give you small fruits. So it's very important that you prune for bigger fruits and you prune that your trees don't fall. Because if you prune, you somehow release the loads on the tree. Because when the trees start producing the fruits, it falls off. Maybe the fruits may be heavy. So if you prune, you also reduce the stress on your trees so that they stand firm and they also produce bigger fruits. It's very important. It improves the tree structure and it directs it to the new healthy growth. You get to get bigger fruits when you prune.
Thanks so much, Thandeka. I just want to know if there's anyone who'd like to ask questions, any of our listeners who'd like to engage with our speakers. And then I'd maybe also just like to ask Eric what else he thinks is important to highlight for farmers who's looking to produce peppers themselves.
This is a game of numbers. Do your research. Don't just start with peppers as your first crop. Try and make time, request to visit. And I'm saying request, unfortunately, for example, on our farm, we're trying to reduce the visitation and mainly because of the global gap standard. But try and associate and hang around people that are already producing this particular crop. Ask the right questions, the right experience, mentorship, and also the right advice. It would be my advice. It took me about 3 years of researching and asking questions and knocking on doors, even though some of the doors were closed on us. But it took me a lot of time to get to a stage to say, but this is actually the crop that I want to do. But how I started with the peppers, I started on a 1,000 square meter and I made a lot of mistakes. I knew nothing about pruning, nothing about foliar mix and the right fertilizers, where you get to a stage where you're putting Land 28 on your peppers. And that's because we didn't have the right experience. But when we started visiting the right farms and hanging around the farmers that were already in production of peppers, and we started to do things the right way. We're still making mistakes till today. We do a lot of trials also for some of the bigger companies. So they would normally send some of their seedlings on our farm and request a 2,500 square meter space, a quarter of a hectare on our farm, and they would run trials. So people don't understand. So companies normally run trials. And that's the reason why they would normally come back in the new year to say this particular variety performs better in the West Rand or so. That's because we would have already ran trials for them.
Thanks, Eric. I see we have a listener who wants to engage. More Moholo, the floor is yours. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you for the information session. I heard one of the speakers talking about the soil tests. My question is, I've seen some kits at retail stores for soil testing. How good are they? And what is their recommendation in terms of which institution should one go to for soil testing if one is situated around Zeerust area in the Northwest? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Eric, would you like to take this one?
We do not do soil testing ourselves. So what we do is we get the agronomist. They would come to the farm and they would take the soil samples and send them to the laboratory. I'm guaranteed there are agronomists around Zira. So what you normally do is, be it ARC or anyone, but the agronomist would normally take the samples, send them to the laboratory. So the invoices and everything will come to you in the soil results. What we then also, over and above that, we then get our own agronomist to analyze the results and put together a planting program. If you go to your NWK, your Abaros and stuff, they would normally recommend some of the agronomists in the area. Remember, the agronomist doesn't have to necessarily be a vegetable agronomist. So they are diverse. And I'm guaranteed some of the maize farmers or other farmers in the Zeerust area, some of the farmers that are already on a commercial level, they guaranteed they've got an agronomist. If you go to them and ask them to recommend an agronomist for you, they will do that. And then you take the step further and ask the agronomist to do the soil test for you. But my advice is, don't try and do it yourself. Get an expert to do it for you.
Just on that point, Eric, and I maybe want to speak as someone as a new farmer, representing them. If they don't have money to pay an agronomist, or if they want to start saving up for that, how much should they be looking at? What are the costs involved?
So we've got a golden rule. If I'm buying seeds from Sakata has to send their own pepper specialist to come to me. Otherwise, I'll go to their competitor. If I'm buying my fertilizer from Liefeld Agrocrem or be it Man, they always have got an agronomist. So what you do is you do not pay the agronomist. In turn, they're giving you the technical advice in exchange for you buying fertilizer from them. We've got 5 agronomists at on our farms. We do not pay services, but maybe that's because also we are commercial. What we also do is, remember, it's also part of the marketing, but when we started as a starter, go to the same company that you're buying the fertilizer from. Just tell them you don't have the money, but you want their technical advice. So they'll give you the agronomist technical advice In exchange, you need to buy fertilizer from them.
That's a good strategy. I hope that that answers our listeners' question and also my question in terms of people don't do things for free these days. Thanks for that. Any other questions? Any other listeners wanting to ask our experts any questions? Something that I may have missed? I think we've covered a lot of ground. We spoke about when to plant, the importance of buying seedlings, and then planting methods. We spoke about that, how to grow. I don't know if there's anyone else that maybe would like to contribute or add something. Eric, am I missing anything? Maybe you can advise as one of the farmers in the space that has been growing this product for a long time.
Climate change is a reality, it's here to stay. As costly as it is to start farming undercover, my advice is normally to say farm undercover. No one expected this heavy rain that we experienced between January and April this year. But in turn, imagine if you have spent about 3,000 rands on your 1,000 seedlings and they get to be wiped out because of heavy rain, because of hail or something. So the best advice for me would be start farming undercover. Be it 1,000 square meters, where there's 2,000 square meters, try and get your production undercover. That way you're also starting to reduce your risk to climate change and all that.
Eric, the other important thing that many farmers do overlook is insurance. That's also one of the things we should also highlight here. I see Tebogo's back. Tebogo, thanks for making your way back to the space. Maybe just final tips as well from our other speakers. Tebogo, do you want to take the floor?
Farmers need to do research as to who they really want to supply before they can plant. And we must always do calculations properly as to how much production inputs you're going to need in terms of seedlings, how much seedlings you need. Again, we need to get a reliable nurseries who can plant some good, strong seedlings. Like Eric mentioned that we need strong seedlings. So those are the things that we need to check. We also need insurance. Should you have your infrastructure, your hydroponic, or your tunnels, let's try to get insurance for in case something bad happened, be it hail or maybe the wind blows your tunnels, so that you don't be out of production. It's better you get insurance like Santam so that they can fix should anything happen.
Thanks, Tebogo. Tandeka, just last comments from you?
I want to start by answering Moremo's question. We have offices, Department of Agriculture offices everywhere. So if you need someone to do the soil testing for you, you can go to the office and you get extension officers. You tell them that you have land somewhere and you want to plant something. They'll surely come and do the soil testing for you.
Thanks for that, Tandeka.
For free.
For free. Moremo Khole, the floor is yours, sir.
Oh, thank you again. I appreciate the counsel or the advice from our experts. I needed to ask, number one, somebody talked about, I think it's Tandeka or someone before Tandeka, talked about reputable seedlings. I wish we knew around the areas where we are staying, where we could go in terms of seedlings which would withstand the test of times in terms of quality. Number two, Tandeka is talking about the extension offices. I would wish to know the timelines. If one goes to their offices, would it be an issue of one waiting for the whole month, a week? Are they spontaneous in response to helping the small upcoming farmers? I've not had a good experience as far as extension officers are concerned, but I'm willing to give them a second chance. Thank you.
Thanks, Tandeka. Do you want to take this one, seeing that you shared the insights before and you've obviously have some experience with that as well?
Yeah, actually, he's right. They do drag their feet, but you can try. Actually, what's for me is visiting them every 2 days. Every 2 days, I'm knocking in the office. Guys, I need you to do the soil testing for me. I need you to do the soil testing for me. I need you. I do that after 2 days. So you just have to nag them. There's nothing else I can actually advise than for me to tell you that you have to nag them, because I know how they are. I know that. So you just have to go and knock every after 2 days.
I guess that's true, Tandeka. I think also there's Eric's strategy in terms of, working with bigger companies and saying, I need my soil tested and I'll buy fertilizer from you as another alternative. Tandeka, last comments from you. Initially, you were just responding to Remo's question around soil testing and extension officers, but just last comments from your side as well.
You should get your things ready. Don't be this one farmer that wants to solve problems as they come. Because I can say that in this journey, I have experienced much challenges due to the fact that I do not plan my things accordingly. So farming needs you to plan things accordingly. You get your pesticides there ready. You test your soil. You don't just do things because I love planting spinach, so I'm just going to go for it. Do the right thing. Get your things ready. in terms of when you need to harvest your crops, you know that you have the correct equipment for harvesting. You have water to wash your crops. You don't need that your crops are rejected because of poor hygiene. So get your things ready. I encourage each and every one of you listening here. You go on with farming. You don't just, food never gets out of fashion. So you continue with this, but by getting your things in the right order before you begin with the farming journey.
Thanks so much, Tandeka. I don't think I could have said it better. Food never goes out of fashion. So thank you so much for those who joined us this evening. Thank you so much to our speakers. And I'm looking forward to another session next week. From me, Donumdu, have a lovely evening further.